sign here, here, and here. That's what the notary told my son. Except the signature on that deed wasn't mine. It was a forgery. A good one, too. He'd been practicing my handwriting for weeks using old birthday cards his mother kept in a shoebox under our bed. But here's the thing about a quiet man who spent 41 years fixing diesel engines with his hands. Those hands remember everything they've ever signed. And the moment I saw that transfer document sitting in a manila envelope on his kitchen counter, I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I walked outside, sat in my truck for 11 minutes, and made one phone call that burned his entire plan to the ground. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this started, back to when I still trusted my own blood. Before I do, if you're watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. I don't ask for much, never have. My name is Harold Brecker. I'm 72 years old. I live at 4817 Millbrook Lane in Covington, Kentucky. Spent 41 years as a diesel mechanic at Reinhardt & Sons Heavy Equipment off Route 17. Retired 6 years ago with a bad shoulder and a pension that keeps the lights on. Nothing fancy, never needed fancy. I married Ruth Ann Dillard on June 14, 1980. A Saturday, hot as blazes. She was the kind of woman who could find something funny in any room, any day. Didn't matter how tight money got. She'd look at me across the kitchen table and say, "What, Harold, at least the roof ain't leaking today." And somehow that was always enough. We bought the house on Millbrook Lane in 1983. Ugly thing when we got it. Peeling paint, rotted porch boards, $62,000. I spent 15 years fixing it the way I fixed engines, one piece at a time. Built Ruth a raised garden bed out of cedar planks. She grew tomatoes, basil, marigolds. We paid off the mortgage in 1998. She made chocolate cake that night. We sat on the porch and watched the street get dark. I think that was the happiest I'd ever been. We had one son, Danny. He was a good kid for a long time. Business degree, steady job in commercial insurance. Married a woman named Vicky in 2006. Sharp. Always put together. They settled 20 minutes away in Florence. No kids, good jobs. Life was fine. Then Ruth got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. She lived 9 months. I won't go into all of it. Some things you carry but you don't display. She passed March 3, 2024. A Sunday, raining. I was holding her hand. The first months after, I barely left the house. I'd make coffee at 5 a.m. and sit at the kitchen table realizing there was no one across from me. I kept her garden going. Watered it every morning. Talked to her, I guess. Danny started coming by more often every few days, then almost daily. Groceries, trash, sitting on the porch. I thought grief was pulling him closer. I thought losing his mother reminded him what mattered. Looking back now, I can see the pattern, but at the time, it just felt like my boy was finally showing up. Late June, 4 months after Ruth passed, Danny brought it up. We were on the porch. He leaned forward and said, "Dad, our house in Florence has a full guest suite downstairs. Private bathroom, its own entrance. You wouldn't even have to use the stairs." I told him I'd think about it 3 weeks later. I said yes. Told myself it was temporary, just through the winter. I packed boxes. Danny loaded them into his black F-150. As I locked the front door at Millbrook Lane, I stood there a second too long. Something felt heavy, like the house knew. Danny honked. "Come on, Dad, Vicky's making pot roast." I pocketed the key and walked to the truck. That was July 9, 2024. The first week was fine. Clean guest suite, dinners together, easy laughter. But on day 9, Danny asked me something at breakfast. Casual as anything. "Hey Dad, do you know where the deed to the Millbrook house is? The original one." I looked at him. Filing cabinet, bottom drawer. "Why?" He shrugged. "Just for insurance stuff," Vicky said. "We should make sure everything's up to date now that Mom's gone." I nodded. Went back to my toast. It made perfect sense. That's the thing about lies that work. They always make just enough sense that you don't look twice. I didn't look twice. I should have. The first 2 weeks at Danny's place, I felt like a guest. Not in a bad way. Just that careful feeling you get when you're sleeping in someone else's house. I folded my towels neat, rinsed my coffee mug right away, kept my shoes lined up by the door. Vicky was attentive. Almost too attentive. She'd bring me tea every evening around 8. "Chamomile," she said. "Good for sleep." And I'll admit I did sleep. Deep, heavy sleep. The kind where you wake up and don't know what day it is. I figured it was the grief finally catching up, the body shutting down because the heart was too tired to keep running on fumes. But there was something about that tea. I'm not saying what I think just yet. I'm just telling you, after that tea, I'd sleep 10, 11 hours straight. Me, a man who hadn't slept past 5:15 since 1979. I didn't think much of it at the time. Third week in, I noticed my mail stopped coming. I mentioned it to Danny one morning. He barely looked up from his phone. "Oh yeah, I set up forwarding for you. Easier this way. All your stuff comes here now. I just stack it on the counter." Except I never saw a stack. Never saw a single envelope with my name on it. When I asked again a week later, Vicky smiled and said, "I filed everything in the office. Didn't want it cluttering up your space." She said it sweet, helpful, like she was doing me a favor. I let it go. Looking back, that's when they had me. The moment I stopped asking twice. Early August, my neighbor Carol Mackey called my cell. Carol's lived across from Millbrook Lane for 19 years. Good woman. Loud but good. She said, "Harold, I don't want a stewman taking pictures of your house yesterday." Had a clipboard. Looked like a realtor. My stomach dropped. "Just a little, just enough." I said, "Probably the insurance company. Danny's handling some updates." Carol said, "All right." Just felt odd, is all. She was measuring the front yard. I thanked her, hung up, told myself it was nothing. That night at dinner I mentioned it to Danny. Light, casual. Carol says someone was photographing the house. Danny didn't flinch. "Oh yeah, I called about a landscaping quote. I thought we'd clean the place up, keep it nice while you're here. You know how fast that yard gets out of hand." I nodded. Vicky passed me the potatoes. Danny Askasation moved on. But something sat wrong in my chest. Small. Like a walking on because stopping feels like making a fuss. 2 days later I was looking for a pen in the kitchen. Opened the junk drawer by the phone. Found a yellow sticky note in Vicky's handwriting. Neat, slanted cursive. It said, "Close 9/14, September 14th, 6 weeks away, closing date." On what? I put the note back, closed the drawer, sat down at Offie and stared at the wall for a long time. There's this thing that happens when you don't want brain offers you exits. Maybe it's their house. Maybe they're refinancing. Maybe Keith is a contractor. Your mind builds little bridges over the truth because the truth is, canyon you're not ready to look down into. I built those bridges. Walked across every one of. For about a week, I kept quiet. Watched. Vicky Wass calls in the garage with the door shut. One night I got up for water. No tea that evening. I'd said my stomach was off and I heard them in the bedroom. Voices low. I couldn't make out words, just tone urgent. Excited? Then Danny laughed quiet, but I heard it. He said tail end of won't even know until it's done. I stood in that dark hallway with my hand on the WD. I felt something I hadn't felt since the doctor told us about Ruth. That feeling when the ground moves and you realize you've been standing on nothing. I went back to my room, lay in the dark, stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. Not that night, not for a while after. I waited 3 days. 3 days of eating breakfast across from my son, passing the butter, talking about the weather like my world wasn't tilting sideways. 3 days of Vicky offering that tea, which I started, pouring down the bathroom sink when she wasn't looking. 3 days of sleeping light, listening through walls, watching everything. On the 4th day, a Saturday, Danny and Vicky left for brunch, someplace in Newport they liked. Vicky wore a sundress. Danny wore that cologne he only puts on when he's trying to impress someone. They said they'd be back by 2. I had the house to myself. I didn't plan it. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a stamp. Vicky kept office supplies in the home office upstairs, a room they told me was just storage, and kept the door closed. But it wasn't locked. That morning, it wasn't locked. The desk was organized. Clean. One of those big monitors. A filing tray. A cup of pens. And sitting right there in the tray, half tucked under a phone bill, a manila envelope. Legal-sized, no label. I opened it. Inside was a property transfer deed. The address at the top, 4817 Millbrook Lane, Covington, Kentucky. My house, Ruth's house. And at the bottom, on the seller's signature line, my name, Harold J. Brecker, written in blue ink, neat, careful, but wrong. See, I've signed my name the same way since I was 19 years old. First day at Reinhardt & Sons, the foreman told me, sign everything, every work order, every time. 41 years of that, thousands of signatures. And there's one thing about my handwriting that nobody notices unless they've watched me do it 10,000 times. The L in Harold. It loops left, always has. It's a quirk. Ruth used to tease me about it. This signature, the L looped right. My son had practiced. I'll give him that. He got a notary who checks 100 signatures a day and doesn't care about any of them, but not close enough to fool me. I stood there in that office for maybe 2 minutes. Didn't move. Didn't breathe right. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Looked at Adam. The date on the deed filed, August 20th. Looked to Millbrook Property Holdings. The sale price, $310,000. My house? The house I built with my hands? The house Ruth died thinking our family would keep, sold out from under me while I slept off chamomile tea in their guest room. I put the envelope back exactly how I found it. Line Bill walked out, closed the door, went downstairs, sat on the edge of my bed, I drove 6 minutes to the BP station on Route 9. E-wall by the air pump. Still works. I don't know why I didn't use my cell. I think I didn't want it on any record. I think some part of me was already thinking like a man with a plan, so I called Marcus Ellison, Ruth's brother, 70 Earlington, spent 32 years as a county prosecutor before his knees gave out and he moved to a desk. Then to a porch. Marcus is the quietest loud man I've ever known. Doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't need to. I told him everything. The deed, the signature, DHS phone call. Danny. Marcus was silent for 10 seconds. Then he said, Not one word. Go back to that house and eat dinner and smile. Can you do that? I said I could. Good. I'm making 3 phone calls. You'll hear from someone named Mitchell Greer by tomorrow morning. He's a real estate fraud. Attorney. Best in the tri-state. After that you jindled the rest. I hung up. Drove back. Parked in the driveway. When he got home at 2:15, I was in my recliner watching a fishing show. Danny said, Hey Dad, good morning. I looked at him. My son. My only child. The boy I taught to ride a bike on Millbrook Lane. Real quiet, I said, just the way I like it. He smiled. Vicky started dinner, and I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, waiting. Mitchell Greer called me the next morning at 7:40 a.m. before Danny was even awake. I took it outside on the back patio, kept my voice low. He was direct. No small talk. Said Marcus had briefed him on everything and he needed 3 things from me: the address of the property, the name on the deed, and permission to run a title search. I gave him all 3 in under a minute. By that afternoon, Mitchell had confirmed it. The deed transfer was filed with the Kenton County Clerk's office on August 20th, notarized by a woman named Sheila Dawkins at a UPS store on Dixie Highway. The buyer was Millbrook Property Holdings LLC, registered 3 weeks prior. One managing member listed, Vicky Brecker. They didn't even try to hide it behind a stranger's name. That's how confident they were. I'd never find out. Mitchell brought in 2 people. A forensic document examiner named Dr. Patricia Horn from Cincinnati, and a private investigator, Dale Ruzicka, former Boone County Sheriff's deputy. Dr. Horn would analyze the signature. Dale would follow the money. I asked Mitchell what this was going to cost me. He said, Harold, this is elder fraud. If we prove it, and we will, Danny pays every cent. You don't worry about my bill right now. 3 weeks. That's how long it took. 3 weeks of me sitting at that dinner table, eating Vicky's pot roast, watching Danny scroll his phone, smiling when they smiled. 3 weeks of sleeping in their guest room knowing exactly what they'd done. You want to know what that feels like? It feels like holding a live wire with dry hands. You don't let go. Because letting go means the spark hits the ground and burns everything before you're ready. Dale found the money first. Danny had received a $40,000 earnest deposit from the buyer, a man named Greg Ostrander who thought he was purchasing a legitimate property from a willing seller. The money went into a joint account Danny and Vicky opened in July at a PNC branch in Erlanger, an account I never knew existed. Dr. Horn's report came back on a Wednesday, 14 pages. She compared my known signatures from pension documents, my truck title, Ruth's hospital consent forms, against the signature on the deed. Her conclusion, stated in language even a jury couldn't argue with. The question signature displays significant deviation in letter formation, pen pressure, and stroke sequencing. It is my professional opinion that the signature was not produced by Harold J. Brecker, forgery confirmed in writing by an expert who testified in over 200 cases. Mitchell filed an emergency injunction with the Kenton County Circuit Court on September 12, 2 days before that closing date, on Vicky's sticky note. The sale was frozen. The deed transfer was flagged as fraudulent. Greg Ostrander got a phone call from a judge's clerk telling him the property he thought he'd bought was stolen. On September 13th, I drove back to Millbrook Lane for the first time in 2 months. I changed the locks myself. Front door, back door, garage, side entry. Took me 40 minutes. I used a Kwikset deadbolt set I'd bought at the Lowe's on Mall Road. Stood on my own porch when I was done and just breathed. The next morning, Danny and Vicky drove to Millbrook Lane. I know because Carol called me. She said they pulled up at 9 a.m., walked to the front door, and Danny's key didn't work. He tried it 3 times. Then Vicky tried hers. Then Danny started pounding on the door, but nobody was inside. Just a certified letter taped to the glass from the Kenton County District Attorney's office. Danny was charged with forgery in the first degree, theft by deception over $10,000, and elder financial exploitation. Carol said Vicky screamed so loud the Hendersons came out on their porch across the street. The trial was short. Danny's lawyer pushed for a plea deal. Danny took it. 3 years supervised probation, $40,000 full restitution, 200 hours, community service, and a permanent restraining order. He is not allowed within 500 feet of me or my property. I moved back into Millbrook Lane on October 1st. Unpacked my bags, put my coffee mug back in the cabinet where it belongs, sat at that kitchen table, Ruth's table, and watched the sun come through the window the way it always used to. The garden was overgrown. Took me a week to get it right again. But the marigolds survived. Ruth's marigolds, tough little things. They don't quit just because nobody was watching. I'm not angry anymore. I was, for a while. That kind of anger that sits in your jaw and won't let you unclench. But it passes. It has to. Because if you carry it, they're still taking something from you. And I decided that morning on the porch with my coffee that nobody takes anything from me ever again. I don't talk to Danny. He sent letters. I don't open them. Maybe one day that'll change. Maybe it won't. That's not my problem to solve anymore. Ruth would have been heartbroken, but she also would have been proud. She always said I was too patient, too quiet, too willing to let things slide because fighting felt like too much noise. She was right, but quiet doesn't mean weak. Patient doesn't mean blind. And when a man like me finally moves, he only has to move once. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know what it feels like when a quiet man stops being a target. Hit that like button if this one stayed with you. Subscribe if you want more. Leave a comment, tell me what you would have done different or what you wouldn't have. I'll see you in the next